Hello, and welcome to our Sage Business Cloud Payroll webinar. Today, we will talk you through how to process your payroll, whether you have just set up and you want to know how to run your first payroll, or if you have been running your payroll for a while and you're looking to gain a little bit more confidence and knowledge on the software. So let's take a look at what we'll cover in today's webinar. We'll remind you how to access Sage Payroll and show you the software in a little bit more detail. So we'll take you on a tour of the software. We'll show you how to prepare before you process your payroll and then move on to the 4-step process of running a pay run. This will include completing the pay run, producing the pay slips, and we'll take you through the submissions that you need to make to HMRC. At the end, we will look at editing a pay run and show you how that works in case you need that. Towards the end of the session, we do cover some commonly asked questions as well. So let's get started. First of all, here's a reminder of how you log into your software. So to log in to Sage Payroll, you head to sage.com and you would select the login option at the top of the page. When you select that login option, you would choose Sage Business Cloud Accounting and Payroll. When you are prompted, you would log in with the credentials that you set when you first signed up for the software. As this is a cloud-based software, you can log into this on any device as long as you have an internet connection. If you do have both accounts and payroll, you will see a drop-down at the top left-hand side when you've logged in. That will allow you to switch between accounting and payroll. So let's go into the software, have a little look around before we go into the processing. This is the payroll summary, and this will show you any current pay runs. It'll give you an overview of your HMRC real-time information and give you some information on where you stand with your pensions. If we move to the pay runs tab at the top, that will show you any pay runs that you have already processed and completed on the right-hand side. If you do need to set up a new pay calendar because you're introducing a new pay frequency, you can click Set up New Calendar and you get the option here to set up a new pay frequency. If we go to the Employees tab, this will give you a list of your current employees. You can tick the box to include any leavers if you do have historical leavers that no longer show on your list of employees. If you would like to edit an employee record, you simply click on their record here and click Edit at the top right. You do have different tabs along the top of the employee record. The next tab at the very top is Pensions. And when you come into this tab, you will see the pension that you have set up. You also have the opportunity to add a new pension. You can click that button and you can choose from the list of available pension providers or add your own pension at the bottom if your provider doesn't appear. You can also edit your current pension here as well by clicking the Edit Pension button. If I go into the Year-End tab, that will show you all of your year-end steps. So once you have completed the entire tax year, you can go through the year-end process from this tab. When you do come to run a year-end from this software, make sure you have the correct year selected in the drop-down. The next tab is Reporting, and this is where you can run various reports to give you information regarding your payroll. If I click onto the first one, for example, you will be asked for certain information to complete that report. This employee net pay report, for example, will give you a list of employees, the method that they're paid, and what their net pay is. So this one is helpful to tell you how much that employee is due for a particular period. You can export reports as a PDF or a CSV. If I go into Settings, this is where all of your payroll settings are held. If you are new to Sage Payroll and you haven't used the software yet, you may want to look at things like the payroll settings and the payslip templates before you come to run a payroll. The payroll settings show you your HMRC information. So you do need to make sure that is correct before you run your first pay run to make sure that your submissions will be successfully sent to HMRC. Your payslip template is the payslip the employees will receive. You do not need any stationery for these. You would just print these onto plain paper. You can also set up online payslips so the employees can log in online to view their payslip information. You can send these via email as well if you would prefer. So you don't actually have to print the payslips, you do have other options. Once you have chosen the correct template for you, click Save. And then you can head back to the settings area. Something else that you may want to look at if you're new to the system, or even if you have been processing for a little while and you do need to set up any extra payments or deductions, is this payments and deductions setting here. If we click onto that, that will show you a list of the payments that you currently have set up. And if we go into deductions, you will also see a list of current deductions. With payments, for example, you can set up salaries and you can set up basic hours. You don't put any values in at this point. This is just setting up the pay element so it's ready to use when you run the payroll. If you need to create a new one, you just click on Create New Payment and choose from the list. Hourly payments will give you two boxes when you run the payroll, one for an amount of hours and one for an hourly rate. Whereas salary pay elements will only give you one box to put in one salaried amount. If we choose salary, you then get to choose a payment type. So whatever category you first choose, it will then give you a list of different types of pay element that you could choose. So if you're setting up a bonus, for example, you would select bonus and you can change the name here if you need to. And the name is what shows on the payslip for the employees. The description is just for you. So if you look back on these pay elements, if you want to put a specific description in there to remind you what this was used for, you can do that here. And you have your pension settings at the bottom. And that would include this pay element in those calculations. If you're unsure if they should be ticked or not, I would suggest speaking to your pension provider. It's the same with deductions. If you go in to create a new deduction, you would first choose the category and then choose the deduction type. And the deduction type will differ depending on what you've selected from the first drop-down. At the top right-hand side, you have an option under your business name to manage business account. When you select this, you get your business information. You get the option to invite your accountant to view your data if you would like to, and you also have a payment method. So you can choose to set up your direct debit from here, or if your direct debit details change, you can change them from within the program. In subscriptions and invoices, you can manage your subscription, and from within here, you can manage your services. And this means that if you get a few extra employees and you need to move up to the next level of payroll, you can simply go into here yourself, go to the next level and subscribe to that. And that will give you extra employee licenses. If we pop back to the main summary screen, you can see at the top, I have accounting as well as payroll. So if I wanted to go into accounting, I would just simply select this option and that will take me into my accounting. In the settings area, you can also set up extra users to the system. So if you do have anybody in your business that you would like to add, you can do that through the user management section of the program. One thing that you may need to consider when you're running a pay run is any employee's absence details. One of the first things that you are asked for when you process a pay run is if there are any absences. Now, the absences that you would put through in a pay run are things like statutory sick pay, paternity, maternity, things like that. You do not need to put holiday into that absences section of the pay run. For now, let's recap on those preparation steps. So if you're new, you would set up your payslips and make sure that you have the correct template. We would also suggest you manage any payments and deductions. So if you've come to a new pay run and you know that you're going to need to pay bonuses, make sure that you go into settings, go into the payments and deductions, and make sure you have a bonus payment ready. If you're new, we would suggest checking your pension setup and making sure everything is correct with that. If you're unsure, you can always check against your provider, or if you've moved from a different software, you can check the setup against your previous software. The next is to make sure that you have any employee absence details ready so that you can pop the dates into your payroll when you're running that pay run. And next, make sure that you know your HMRC details. So that includes things like the PAYE reference number, the Accounts Office reference number, and your details for the online HMRC submissions. So that would be your user ID and your password for the government gateway. We're now ready to process a pay run. So this is going to be a demo that will run through a typical pay run, and we'll look at what you need to do at the end of your P32 reporting period as well. So let's pop back into payroll. So here in the summary tab, you will see the next pay run that you are due to run. As you can see, I have both weekly and monthly pay runs, and you can see my pay date here. Once you are ready to process your pay run, you can just click on the Process Pay Run button on the right-hand side. You can also do this from the Pay Runs tab and click the button in here. I'm going to do this from Summary, and I am going to run my monthly payroll. So from the Summary, I'm going to click Process Pay Run. The very first step of a pay run is to check the pay date. The pay date comes from your calendar settings. So whatever you have set up in your payroll calendar, that is what appears here. If this isn't the correct date and isn't the date you're physically paying your employees, you can click on the calendar icon and change that date. That date does need to be within the tax period. So any dates that are unavailable will be grayed out and you will not be able to select those. If the date is correct and you're happy with that, then you can just click Next. You will see a list of your employees down the left-hand side, and this is step 2 of the payroll. This is where you would add any absences to your employee records. So like I said earlier, these absences do not include holidays. These are your statutory absences. So if you have any paternity pay, any adoption pay, sick pay, bereavement pay, things like that, you would pop them into here. So say, for example, you had statutory sick pay. You would click on sickness. You would tell the system whether you have received the correct documentation. And then you can enter a start date and an end date of that absence. The system will then calculate the SSP based on the dates that you have entered. If it's long-term sick and you don't yet know the end date, you can move that along next time you process the pay run. You can move down to the next employee and do the same thing and add any absences that are required for that employee. If you're unsure at any point, you have a question mark icon in the program here, and that will take you to our help page. If you do want to look into anything more specific, you can click on the left-hand side articles and find what you're looking for. In this instance, we don't have any sickness or maternity, paternity, any of those statutory payments. So I'm just going to click Next. Step 3 of the pay run is where you build that employee's payslip. As you can see, it already shows basic hours and bonus, and that's because this is what was processed in the previous tax period. So I'm going to take off this bonus as that was a one-off in the last pay run. The PAYE, National Insurance and Pension have automatically calculated for me. Then if I go into Employee 2, we have the same thing. We'll take off the bonus for that employee and we already have their salary in there. And that is remembered from the previous period. There has been an increase in the salary for this person. So if that's the case, you can simply just change that here. And that will recalculate the PAYE, National Insurance and Pension. If you do need to add anything else, you can drop these boxes down and add any payments and deductions to that employee. If you would like to add a payslip message, you can do that using this option at the bottom. And that message will appear on the employee's payslip. If the employee hasn't worked in the period that you're paying for, you do have a tick box at the bottom to exclude employee. And that will exclude the employee from every pay run until you choose to untick that box. Once you are happy that you have added everything that you need to for every employee, you can click Next. In step 4 of the pay run, this is where you can see draft pay slips and you can run a detailed report. So if we click on Open the detailed report here, that gives you an overview of the pay run that you are completing. So because I've excluded employee 1 from the pay run, as you can see, it's zeros along the top for that employee. So in this report, you get an employee pay slip summary. You get a breakdown of what pay elements and deductions you have used. You can see the employer costs and your HMRC totals. And you can see a breakdown of what needs to be paid to each employee. And at the bottom, you have any year-to-date values. You can save this report or you can print it using the icons on the top right. They might differ depending on what browser you're using, but you will be able to save or print this report. You can get this report once you have completed the pay run. So if you complete the pay run and you haven't saved that report or printed it if you would like, you can still get it, and I'll show you that in a moment. You also have the employee breakdown. If you click on the payslip link to the right-hand side of the employee, you will get a draft version of the payslip. This isn't the one that you would send to your employees. This is the one that you can look at just to make sure that you are happy with everything that is on that payslip. Once you are happy that all of the values are correct, you can click Complete Pay Run. If you are brand new to the software, at this point you will be asked for your HMRC login information, and that's the login information for the online services. If you've been running payroll for a little while and you've just recently changed your password to the online services, you will need to use this option to change the details in the software. If nothing has changed, just click Confirm and that will submit your full payment submission to HMRC. The full payment submission that it is submitting at this point includes all of the employees and what they were paid in the current period. So HMRC at this point gets everything that they need to know regarding the pay run that you have ran for those employees. As you can see in the HMRC real-time information section on the left, our submission has been successfully sent. On the right-hand side, you have some information regarding your pension submission. So if you are with Nest or Smart Pensions, you can submit directly from the software to the provider. So if you're looking to do that, you can click View Submission Details and you can submit online to Nest. And if it's your first time, you may be asked for your Nest logon information so that it can connect the two systems. If you're looking to manually input the information into your Nest portal or any other provider, you can look at this report to do so. You can also manually get the CSV file if you would prefer to import the CSV file manually. I'm just going to click back and that takes us back to the completed pay run window. On the left-hand side at the top, you have the options to export all payslips. So I can get those as a PDF. I can email those If I select email, that will provide you with a draft of the email that the employee will receive. So if you want to add anything to this, you can simply type into this box. If you are ready to send the emails to the employees, you simply select Send Email. To be able to email the payslips, each employee would need the email address set in their employee record, and you would also have to set a password in the employee record as well. If you haven't completed those two things in the Employees tab, you will not be able to email the payslip. As you can see, Employee 2 here doesn't have an email icon, which means I haven't set that employee up to receive emailed payslips. If I select PDF in this drop-down, I will get a PDF including payslips for all employees. If I select the page icon on the right of each individual, I will get a PDF for just that employee. So once you've completed the pay run, you're automatically brought to this screen where you can complete steps like your payslips or your pension submission information. You also have a link at the top here to the detailed report. That's the one I showed you a little bit earlier in step 4 of the pay run that I said you could get back to. And you can come back in here and get that report at any time. If I pop to the summary tab, you can see my monthly pay run here has moved on to the next month. So that was a pay run and how to process and submit to HMRC. So let's recap on processing and simplify the process and break it down into steps. So step 1 of the pay run is simply to set your pay date. And that's the date the employees are being paid. It's not the date that you are running the payroll. The next step is to enter any absences. This isn't holiday, this is your statutory absences. So that will be things like your statutory sick, maternity, paternity, etc. The next step is to add any payments and deductions. And that is making sure that you build your employees' pay to be correct with the correct salaries, the correct hourly payments, and any extra payments like bonuses or overtime that they may be due. Remember, any payments and deductions that you add will be remembered for the following pay period. So if there's anything that is a one-off, remember to check your payments and deductions when you're processing in the following period to make sure you don't accidentally pay or deduct something that's not relevant for that next pay run. And lastly, you would complete your pay run. When you do complete the pay run and send your full payment submission to HMRC, you will get confirmation in that completed pay run screen that your submission has been successfully sent. Let's take a look at the reports that you can run from that reporting drop-down that I showed you a little bit earlier that's in your payroll program. So the first report that you can run is the employee net pay report. And that shows the net pay totals. So when you run that report, you can choose the pay frequency and the pay date, and you can see how much you need to send to that employee's bank. The next report is a payslip summary report, and that provides a breakdown of the information on someone's payslip. So if you want to see a breakdown of all employees in one place for one particular pay period, including their net pay, you can use that report. The employer costs report is a summary of the cost to you as an employer. You can see how much the payroll is costing you, and it's a good report to use for things like budgeting and forecasting future pay runs. The liability totals report would be ran for each period, and that will show you things like PAYE and national insurance, and you will be able to reconcile those values against the P32 report, which we're going to cover soon. The P32 report gives you a value at the end of the month or quarter, depending on how often you pay HMRC, and tells you the PAYE, national insurance, etc. for that full month or quarter. However, if you run a weekly payroll, you might want to run this liability totals report so that you can reconcile each week and check that amount against your P32. The last report that we will look at here is the average earnings report. The average earnings and working hours report will help you calculate any average earnings you might need for any calculations. For example, government help schemes or holiday entitlements. That might be the report that you would use for those. So I'll now go back into the payroll and talk you through your P32 and EPS process. And you should complete that at the end of each P32 reporting period. Now, when we talk about a P32 reporting period, this is set in your payroll software. So if you go to Settings and then Payroll Settings, you can see your HMRC reporting frequency here. And that is something that you set up at the start of the tax year or when you first set up your payroll program. In my case, I'm set to monthly, but you could have set this to quarterly. Let's pop back to the Summary tab. To be able to run your P32 or your EPS, which is Employer Payment Summary, you will need to have completed every single pay run within a tax month or quarter. So because I have both weekly and monthly pay runs, my weekly pay runs need to be completed up to and including the 5th of the following month. And this is because tax months run from the 6th of one month to the 5th of the next. And if all of my weekly pay runs aren't completed within that period, I will not be able to run my month-end tasks. In the HMRC real-time information section at the bottom left here, you can see a countdown to when my EPS is due. You can also see pay runs not completed on the right-hand side. And that's telling me that I haven't completed all of the pay runs to be able to process that EPS. If we look at the pay runs above, you can see that I haven't completed my weekly pay runs within that tax month. So what I need to do before I can run my month end is complete my processing. So I'm just going to do that now. Remember, you can change that date if you need to when you're running your pay run. You can add any absences to employees. If you do have any historical absences here, don't delete those. You would need to leave those in this screen. And the next step is to build the employee's pay. So I have an employee here with a salary, and my next employee also has a salary. But for this pay period, I do need to put some overtime hours. So I'm going to pop the amount of hours, and then I'm going to pop the hourly rate in there. So as you can see, your hourly pay elements are slightly different to your salaries, where you get 2 boxes instead of 1. And I'm just going to click Next. And I'm going to complete the pay run. As you can see on the left, my FPS is being transmitted to HMRC. If I pop back to the Summary tab, you can also see that information. You can see that we no longer have the pay runs not completed message. We have the option to record the payment /EPS. Before running your EPS or your P32 report, if you haven't yet done so, I would suggest recording your employment allowance claim. You can see this at the bottom left of your payroll. There is a link for help with employment allowance claims, which will take you to our help information if you're unsure. So from the 6th of April 2022, if your company is eligible for employment allowance, this will reduce your employer's Class 1 National Insurance contributions by up to £5,000 per year, and this will be automatically applied to your P32 report at the end of the month. I'm going to click Record Claim. So you must choose an industry sector before you submit your claim, and if you're not sure which sector applies to your business, you can contact HMRC. If you would like further help or information, click the question mark icon, and you do get more information on our help files as well. Check the information you have entered and click Next. Step 2 is confirming what you have selected in Step 1, and then you can submit your claim from here. HMRC will then send you a letter or email to confirm whether your application has been approved. You can also find the EPS from your Pay Runs tab. If we click on Pay Runs, and you can click on any of the pay runs within that tax month or quarter to get to your P32 report and your EPS submission. Once you've clicked on one of the pay periods, you will see on the bottom left-hand side, you have the EPS countdown and the option to record the payment/EPS. As you can see underneath, this is where you would get your P32 employer payment record. The P32 employer payment record is the report that you would use to know how much to pay HMRC. So first, if I click record payment/EPS, you first tell the system whether you are entitled for small employers relief. And then, because we have already sent our claim from the summary tab, the next box is already selected as yes. You can change that from the drop-down. The amount due to HMRC is automatically applied and grayed out. That is because it's calculated based on what you have processed in the payroll. Underneath, you would record the amount that you're paying to HMRC. If you have the payroll integration set up between your payroll and accounting program, this will post automatically to your accounting. You can then enter your payment date and then click Next. The balances in step 2 are mostly grayed out, and this is because the payroll calculates these automatically for you. If you have suffered any CIS deductions, you can pop those into here and they would reduce your bill to HMRC. Click Next, and then you can click Submit. If there is no EPS submission due, there will be nothing submitted to HMRC in this period. The EPS is simply there to tell HMRC about anything extra that you need to declare that wasn't on your full payment submission when you ran the pay run. So things like statutory payment reclaims would mean that you need to process an EPS every single P32 reporting period. If you haven't got any statutory payments and there's nothing changed in your payroll, you may not have to submit this submission. However, you should go through the EPS process every single tax month or quarter. So I'll click Submit. And as you can see, we've been brought back to the summary page and that EPS is being transmitted. If I pop back to the Pay Runs tab and go back into my pay run and click P32 Employer Payment Record, that will give you your breakdown of PAYE, National Insurance and Statutory Payment Recovery. And at the bottom, if you are claiming employment allowance, it will give you a summary of what you're claiming in the employment allowance in this P32 reporting period. Just above the line, you can see your revised amount due, and that is how much you owe to HMRC for that reporting period. You can print or save that report, or you can get that from your payroll program at any time. If you have processed a pay run and realise that you have processed something incorrectly, we would suggest that if you can, you wait until the next pay period to make that change. So say, for example, you have forgotten to pay overtime or a bonus. We would suggest, if at all possible, waiting until the next pay period and making the correction there. If this isn't the case and you can't wait, you can go into the Pay Runs tab, click on the pay run that you need to edit, and click the Edit Pay Run button. However, please be aware that your FPS submission has already been successfully sent to HMRC, and that submission tells HMRC about everything that is included in this pay run. So if I just show you an edited pay run, so I'll click Edit, and I've realised that I haven't paid this employee their overtime. So I'm going to pop some overtime in for that employee. As you can see, the pay due at the top has changed. So I'm going to click Next and View Summary, and you can get a new payslip for that employee at this point. If I go to run the next week, click process pay run, and I'm just going to skip through these steps to show you. You can see a correction showing on that employee's wage. Now that correction appears automatically, and that is the difference between the original net pay that you processed for that employee and the new net pay since editing the record. What you then do with that correction will depend on whether that employee is owed that money and you didn't pay them it last time, or if you did pay them that extra amount already and they've already got that extra amount in their bank, then you would need to reverse that correction. There is no way to delete the correction from the record here. So what you would do is add a new payment in this instance. You would go to expenses and business expenses. And then change the name of the element. The reason I've chose business expenses is because that is not going to affect any calculations of tax, national insurance or pension. And then you would simply need to put a minus value for the same amount as the correction. And that will cancel out the correction on the record. Sometimes you may see a correction as a deduction dependent on the change that you have made. So please be very aware that if you do see a correction on your pay run, it is because something has changed in a previous period that you had already completed. If the employee hadn't been paid that amount and were owed that £91.02, you wouldn't need to do the correction reversal. You could simply leave that amount on their payroll. If you do need to edit a pay run and you are unsure at all, click on the help option at the top. And you can use this search option here to search for what you're looking for. So let's recap on the steps. First, you should complete all of your pay runs and submit your FPS to HMRC. You should produce payslips and any other reports. And paying your employees should be completed outside of the payroll programme. Even if you have entered bank details into the employee records, that is for your information only, and the payroll does not connect directly to the bank. You would need to update your pension provider with the deductions for that period. And at the end of the month or quarter, you should run your P32 report, check the values, and run your EPS. Then you would need to pay HMRC for the values on your P32 report. We'll now go through a few common questions and answers. The first one is, how do I add more employees to my subscription? And as we showed you earlier, you would do this from the drop down at the top and click on Manage Business Account. That will take you to the business management area. You can click on Subscription and Invoices and manage your subscription from here. The next one is, how is the pension calculated? So if you're new to payroll, you might not think the pension is calculating correctly. And if this is the case, the first thing that we would suggest that you do is check your pension setup, because it does depend on how you have set up the pension as to how it will calculate. So if you go into the Pensions tab, click to edit the pension. It might look slightly different to this if you are using a different provider to Nest. This is currently a Nest pension. If I click to edit, this tells us how we have the pension set up. So the pension is set up based on a percentage and it's deducted after tax. If you have something else selected in here, say for example deducted before tax, it will calculate the pension slightly differently. If I click next, you can also see the earnings basis. So if you have qualifying earnings selected, this will use earnings bandwidths. So employees' calculations might be lower on a percentage than what you would see on a pensionable pay scheme. So if you have set up your pension and your calculations don't look quite right, I would check these setup steps against your provider if you are at all unsure, because it's likely to be one of these options has been selected incorrectly. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is why the submission to Nest is failing. And a lot of the time that is to do with how the nest groups and sources are set up. So in your nest portal, your group can be set up as monthly or tax monthly, for example. For our system to be able to submit to Nest, your Nest group needs to be set up as tax monthly rather than calendar monthly. So I would suggest checking that in your Nest portal. Something else to check in the payroll is to make sure that when you go into pensions and edit your pension, your group name and your source name are exactly the same as what you see them in your Nest portal. That means capital letters in the right places and spaces where there are spaces. If they're not exact, your submission will fail to Nest. Can my accountant access my payroll? Yes, your accountant can. I showed you that a little bit earlier. You would just go into your Manage Business Account area and invite your accountant. If you get a notification from HMRC within your online services, you can change the tax code in the employee's record. Whenever you do receive a notification from HMRC, there will be an effective date. So please make sure that you are changing the tax code at the right time for the correct pay run. You would simply go into the employee record by going into Employees, clicking on the employee and click Edit, and you can change their tax code here. The next one is, how do I make someone a leaver? Within the payroll, you would simply go into Employees and you can click the cross next to the employee's name, and that will ask you for their last working day. You need to make sure that you have completed all pay runs for that employee and they're not due any more pay. Once you have completed the pay runs, you can pop in their leaving date and you will be able to get the P45 from within their employee record. So when you set up a new employee, you will be asked for either a P45 or a P46. So if a new employee starts with you, you can go into the Employees tab and click Create Employee. You would pop their details in and you would fill in as much information as you can get. And at the bottom, you have the starting basis. So from within here, you have P46. Now, if someone starts with you and they do not give you a P45, you should get them to fill in a P46. Now, this is also known as the starter statements. So you can get those from HMRC. So this takes us to the end of what we're going to cover in this processing webinar. There are other things that you can explore, such as the pension submissions in a little bit more detail. We do have videos and information on our help files, so please visit those by clicking the help option at the top of your screen if you do need any help. As we mentioned, we do have the Help Centre, and that is most easily accessed via your programme. So if you go into payroll, you can click on Help at the top. If we scroll to the very bottom, we have an option to get in touch. So you would pop in that you're a customer and that you need help with Sage Business Cloud Payroll, and that will give you the support options available. So there's online chat, telephone support, or email. I hope you have found that useful and you're now confident in how you can run a payroll in Sage Payroll. Thanks again, and please stay safe. We do hope to see you on another webinar again soon.